Mary Thompson stood at the kitchen window, her weathered hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. Outside, the industrial town of Manchester sat heavy under a grey morning sky, its brick buildings casting long shadows across narrow streets. Her father, George, shuffled in the background, the sound of his walking frame a familiar rhythm in their small terraced house. At 38, Mary had already known more struggle than most. Her husband, James, had died 2 years earlier in a workplace accident at the local steel factory, leaving her alone with her aging father and a mountain of unexpected bills. The insurance money had been quick to disappear, swallowed by medical expenses and the rising cost of living. Every morning was the same routine. Mary would wake before dawn, prepare a simple breakfast of toast and weak tea, make sure her father took his medication, and then walk the 3 miles to the textile factory where she worked. Her job was repetitive and exhausting, standing for hours, operating massive machines that wove fabric for clothing manufacturers. Her fingers were calloused, her back constantly aching, but she never complained. The factory floor was a harsh world of noise and monotony. Women like Mary worked side by side, their movements synchronized like the machines they operated. They spoke little, saving their energy for the endless hours of work. Her supervisor, Mr. Thompson, no relation, was a stern man who watched every movement, counting minutes and measuring productivity. Mary's weekly paycheck was barely enough to cover their basic needs. Electricity bills arrived like unwelcome visitors, rent was always a challenge, and her father's heart medication was increasingly expensive. She had learned to budget down to the last penny, cutting corners wherever possible. Second-hand clothes, discount groceries, and carefully planned meals became her survival strategy. Her father George had once been a proud factory worker himself. Now, confined to a chair and dependent on Mary, he carried a deep sense of guilt. "I'm sorry, love," he would often say, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and frustration. Mary would always respond with a gentle smile, "Don't you worry, Dad. We'll manage." And manage they did. Mary took on additional cleaning jobs in the evenings, mending clothes for neighbors, and occasionally helping local shopkeepers with odd tasks. Her reputation in the community grew not as someone to be pitied, but as a woman of incredible resilience and quiet strength. The local church became another source of support. The community there knew Mary's story and would sometimes leave care packages or help with small repairs around their house. Mrs. Roberts, an elderly church volunteer, would bring homemade soup, understanding that every small gesture of kindness mattered. Nights were the hardest. After a long day of work, Mary would sit by her father, helping him with his medications, listening to old stories about his younger days. Sometimes, in the silence between his stories, she would think about James, about the life they had planned together, about the children they had hoped to have. But Mary was not a woman who dwelled on sorrow. Each morning, she would wake up, put on her faded work dress, tie her hair back, and face the day with determination. Her world was small: a narrow street in Manchester, a textile factory, her father's care, survival, but within that world, she was powerful. Winter was approaching, and with it came additional challenges. Heating costs would rise, work might become less stable, and her father's health could potentially decline. But Mary had weathered difficult times before. She would find a way, as she always did. Her daughter Emily, living and working in London, would call occasionally. "Mom, why don't you let me help?" she would ask. But Mary would always refuse, her pride and independence a shield against potential pity. As the first light of dawn broke through the kitchen window, Mary finished her tea and prepared for another day. Her father stirred in the background, the house slowly coming to life. Another day of work, of survival, of quiet, unsung heroism was about to begin. In the grand scheme of the world, Mary Thompson might seem insignificant. But to those who knew her, her father, her community, her daughter, she was everything: a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience, a testament to the human spirit's incredible capacity to endure. The winter arrived with a harsh breath, cutting through Manchester's narrow streets like a knife. Mary Thompson stood in the textile factory's break room, her hands trembling as she listened to the manager's words. "Downsizing," he said. "Budget cuts." The word redundancy hung in the air like a cold, heavy cloud. 30 workers would lose their jobs, and Mary was among them. Her world seemed to shrink in that moment, the familiar hum of machinery suddenly silent. She thought of her father, of the medical bills, of the tiny savings they had managed to accumulate. Everything felt uncertain. Walking home that day, the streets seemed colder, more unforgiving. Snow began to fall, tiny crystals of uncertainty landing on her worn coat. She rehearsed how she would tell her father, practicing a smile that would hide her fear. George knew something was wrong the moment she entered. At 78, his eyes were still sharp, his understanding of his daughter's emotions deep and intuitive. "What's happened?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Mary explained the job loss carefully, her words measured. She didn't want him to worry, to feel the weight of their financial burden. But worry he did. That night, she heard him moving restlessly in his bedroom, the creak of his bed a testament to his anxiety. The next morning, Mary began her hunt for work. She visited every local business, leaving her contact details, offering to do any job available. Cleaning, administrative work, shop assistance, nothing was beneath her. Pride was a luxury she could not afford. Local shopkeepers knew her reputation. Mrs. Peterson, who ran the small convenience store, offered her some cleaning shifts. Mr. Roberts from the printing shop needed someone to help organize paperwork. These were not full-time jobs, but they were lifelines. Mary began taking sewing work home. She would mend clothes for neighbors, repair torn uniforms, alter garments. Her sewing machine, a gift from her late husband, became her most valuable tool. Each stitch was a small act of defiance against their challenging circumstances. The community began to notice her efforts. Neighbors would leave small packages, a bag of potatoes, a loaf of bread, a jar of homemade jam. These were not acts of charity, but of genuine respect and support. Her daughter Emily called frequently, offering financial help. But Mary was stubborn. "We'll manage," she would say, her voice steady. "We always have." Winter deepened, and with it came additional challenges. Heating became expensive, and Mary learned to be creative. Extra blankets, careful use of electricity, wearing multiple layers. Her father's medication remained the priority. Some days were harder than others. There were moments of quiet desperation, looking at their dwindling bank balance, wondering how they would make ends meet. But Mary never allowed these moments to consume her. She joined a local support group for unemployed workers. Here, she found more than just job leads. She found community, understanding, shared stories of struggle and hope. People like her, hardworking, determined, refusing to be defeated by circumstances. One particularly challenging week, their old water heater broke. Repair would cost money they didn't have. But a local plumber, hearing their story, offered to fix it at a reduced rate. "Consider it a community service," he said with a kind smile. George, despite his age and health challenges, tried to help. He would sort through paperwork, make phone calls, do whatever he could to support Mary. Their relationship, always close, became even more intertwined during these difficult months. Mary's routine became a delicate dance of survival. Morning cleaning shifts, afternoon sewing work, evening administrative tasks. Every hour was an opportunity, every skill a potential income source. As winter progressed, something remarkable happened. Mary was not just surviving, she was slowly, carefully, rebuilding. Her resilience was not a sudden explosion of strength, but a quiet, persistent flame that refused to be extinguished. Her story was not unique in Manchester, a city built on working-class determination. But it was uniquely her own. A story of a woman who understood that challenges were not walls, but merely obstacles to be navigated with patience, creativity, and unwavering hope. The cold morning light crept through the kitchen window as Mary sorted through her stack of job applications. Her fingers, rough from years of factory work and recent sewing projects, traced the edges of yet another rejection letter. Outside, Manchester's industrial landscape seemed as grey and unyielding as her current circumstances. Robert Andrews owned a small printing shop just 2 streets away from Mary's home. He had watched her for months, not in a suspicious way, but with growing respect. He saw her cleaning the local convenience store, noticed her helping elderly neighbors, witnessed her determination during community repair projects. One particularly chilly morning, Robert was organizing some paperwork outside his shop when Mary walked past. She was carrying a bag of mended uniforms for Mrs. Peterson's store, her father's medication tucked carefully in her coat pocket. Something about her movement, dignified, purposeful, caught Robert's attention. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice kind but firm. Mary turned, surprised. Most people in the neighborhood had learned to mind their own business. Robert explained he needed someone to help with administrative work. Part-time, flexible hours, basic pay. Nothing glamorous, but steady work. Mary's eyes filled with a mix of hope and caution. She had learned that opportunities often came with hidden complications. During her first interview, Mary was brutally honest. She explained her situation caring for her elderly father, losing her factory job, taking whatever work she could find. Robert listened carefully. He wasn't just hearing her words, he was understanding her character. The printing shop was small but well organized. Machines hummed quietly, stacks of paper were neatly arranged, and the smell of ink filled the air. Mary's organizational skills, honed through years of managing a challenging household, became immediately apparent. Her first tasks were simple filing documents, answering occasional phone calls, organizing delivery schedules. But Mary approached each task with the same intensity she applied to everything in her life. Precision, care, complete commitment. Robert noticed something special about her. While many employees might see such work as mundane, Mary treated each task as an opportunity. Her attention to detail was remarkable. She filed documents alphabetically, color-coded delivery notes, and always ensured everything was perfect. George, her father, was thrilled. "A proper job," he said, his eyes sparkling with pride. "My girl, always landing on her feet." Mary would smile, knowing how much this meant to him. Employment wasn't just about money, it was about dignity, purpose, hope. The work wasn't just financial for Mary. It was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild her sense of self. Each paycheck was carefully budgeted, some for their household expenses, some saved for potential emergencies, a small amount set aside for her father's additional medical needs. Robert began to see Mary as more than just an employee. She was reliable, intelligent, and carried a quiet strength that was rare. He started teaching her more advanced administrative skills, computer work, basic accounting, customer communication. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Mary's world began to expand. The tight, survival-focused existence she had known started to give way to something more. She joined a local evening class to improve her computer skills. She became more confident in her interactions with customers and suppliers. Her daughter Emily noticed the change during her monthly phone calls. "Mom sounds different," she told her friends. More positive, more herself. The transformation wasn't dramatic, but it was profound. The printing shop became more than just a workplace for Mary. It became a space of personal growth, of rediscovery. She was learning that her worth wasn't defined by her past struggles, but by her ongoing resilience. As spring approached, bringing with it hints of new beginnings, Mary realized something important. Hope wasn't a grand, sweeping gesture. It was these small moments: a kind employer, a steady job, the ability to care for her father, the promise of a slightly better tomorrow. Her story was becoming less about survival and more about rebuilding. And in the heart of Manchester, among its brick buildings and industrial landscape, Mary Thompson was quietly, powerfully, writing her own narrative of hope. The community center was quiet that Wednesday evening when Mary first walked through its doors. Rows of chairs formed a circle, occupied by women whose stories seemed etched into their faces. This was the Widows' Support Group, a place she had avoided for 2 years, believing her pain was too private, her struggles too personal. Margaret, the group's facilitator, had been gently encouraging Mary for months. Sometimes, she would say, sharing doesn't mean weakness. It means finding strength together. Mary had always dismissed such words, her pride a protective shield around her heart. But something had changed. Perhaps it was the new job at the printing shop, or the sense of slow recovery that had begun to take root in her life. That evening, she sat quietly at the edge of the circle, listening more than speaking. The women shared stories of loss, of unexpected challenges, of rebuilding. Some spoke of financial struggles, others of emotional healing. Mary realized she wasn't alone in her journey. Each woman carried a different burden, but they all shared a common thread of resilience. Helen, a retired teacher in her 60s, became Mary's first real connection in the group. Her husband had passed away 5 years earlier, leaving her with a small pension and a lifetime of memories. "The first years are the hardest," Helen told Mary, her hand gently touching Mary's arm. "But life finds a way of surprising you." Robert from the printing shop had been encouraging Mary's personal growth. He noticed her growing confidence, her expanding skills. He started teaching her more advanced administrative tasks, recognizing her potential beyond simple filing and phone answering. Mary began to take evening classes at the local community college. Computer skills, basic accounting, communication techniques, she approached each class with the same determination she had once applied to factory work. Her daughter Emily was amazed by the transformation. "I barely recognize you, Mom," Emily said during one of their phone calls. "You sound different. Stronger." Mary smiled, understanding that strength wasn't about never falling, but about rising each time you fall. The support group became more than just a weekly meeting. These women became a network of support. They shared job leads, helped each other with practical challenges, celebrated small victories. Mary learned to ask for help, a skill she had never mastered before. Her father George watched this transformation with quiet joy. "Your mother is becoming herself again," he would tell Emily during their conversations. The worry lines that had carved themselves into his face began to soften. At the printing shop, Mary's improved skills and confidence began to show. Robert started giving her more responsibilities. She managed small projects, interacted with customers, became an integral part of the small business's operations. The community seemed to notice her transformation. Neighbors who had once seen her as just another struggling widow now saw her as a symbol of resilience. Mrs. Peterson from the convenience store would stop her on the street, asking about her work, her father, her classes. Mary's world was expanding. The tight, survival-focused existence she had known was giving way to something richer, more complex. She was discovering parts of herself she had forgotten existed: her intelligence, her capacity for learning, her ability to connect with others. Her daughter Emily began visiting more frequently. The small changes in her mother were remarkable. The way she carried herself, spoke, approached challenges, everything seemed different. "You're discovering yourself," Emily would say, hugging her mother tightly. As summer approached, Mary realized something profound. Her journey wasn't just about surviving loss or managing financial challenges. It was about rediscovering herself, building connections, finding strength in community. The widow who had once been defined by her losses was now creating a new narrative. One of hope, of connection, of quiet, persistent strength. In the heart of Manchester, Mary Thompson was writing her own story, one day at a time. Her life was no longer about mere survival. It was about living, truly living, with hope and purpose. As the year drew to a close, Mary Thompson stood in Robert's printing shop, looking nothing like the desperate woman who had walked in months earlier. Her transformation was subtle but profound, a mixture of newfound confidence, quiet strength, and renewed hope. Robert had become more than just an employer. He was a mentor, someone who saw potential where others might have seen just another struggling worker. He recommended Mary for additional training, supported her evening classes, and gradually increased her responsibilities at the shop. Her connection with the widow's support group had changed everything. What began as a hesitant weekly meeting had become a lifeline of friendship and support. Helen, the retired teacher, had become a close friend and confidant. They would meet for tea, share stories, and support each other through life's challenges. George, her father, witnessed this transformation with immense pride. His health had stabilized, thanks to Mary's careful management of his medical care and their improved financial situation. The worry that had once clouded his eyes was replaced by a gentle spark of hope. Emily, Mary's daughter, noticed the most significant changes. During her visits from London, she saw a mother who was no longer just surviving, but truly living. Mary spoke about her work with enthusiasm, shared stories about her evening classes, and laughed more freely than she had in years. The community began to see Mary differently. She was no longer just the widow who worked multiple jobs, but a symbol of resilience. Local businesses knew her as reliable, hardworking, and kind. The small network she had built became her strength, a web of support that lifted her up during challenging times. Her administrative skills at the printing shop continued to improve. Robert trusted her with more complex tasks, recognizing her potential. She managed small projects, interacted with customers, and became an essential part of the business's daily operations. The evening classes she had been taking began to pay off. Her computer skills improved, her confidence grew, and she started to see possibilities she had never imagined before. The woman who had once felt trapped by her circumstances was now creating her own opportunities. Financial stability, something that had seemed impossible just a year ago, was now within reach. Her careful budgeting, multiple income streams, and support network had transformed their household. She could now afford small luxuries, a slightly better heating system, occasional treats for her father, a bit of savings for emergencies. The widow's support group became a testament to her growth. Mary went from being a quiet, hesitant participant to someone who offered support and guidance to newer members. Her story became a beacon of hope for women facing similar challenges. As Christmas approached, Mary reflected on the journey of the past year. The loss of her job, the financial struggles, the emotional challenges, they seemed like distant memories now. She had not just survived, she had thrived. Her daughter organized a small celebration for her birthday. Friends from the support group, colleagues from the printing shop, and local community members gathered. It was more than just a birthday party, it was a celebration of Mary's incredible journey. Robert gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Mary, he said, is a reminder that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about rising every single time you fall. The room erupted in applause. George, sitting in his favorite chair, watched the celebration with tears in his eyes. The daughter he had worried about had become a source of inspiration for everyone around her. His health might be fragile, but his spirit was strong, fueled by Mary's incredible transformation. As the year ended, Mary understood something profound. Her journey was not just about overcoming challenges, but about discovering her own strength. She had learned that life's most important lessons often come from its most difficult moments. The community saw her as more than just a survivor. She was a symbol of hope, a testament to the human spirit's incredible capacity to rebuild, to grow, to find joy even in the most challenging circumstances. In the heart of Manchester, Mary Thompson had written a story of transformation, quiet, powerful, and absolutely beautiful. Her triumph was not in grand gestures, but in the small, daily acts of courage and love that had slowly, carefully rebuilt her life.